Hey, Gary, I'm curious. I wanted to have a conversation about the history and future of music therapy. So, why don't you take a few seconds and just tell me about the earliest recorded history of music being used as therapy?
Absolutely, Brendan. So, when we look way back, the idea of using music as a form of healing goes back thousands of years. Ancient cultures like the Egyptians, the Greeks, and even the Chinese have records of using music in healing rituals or to help with mental well being. For example, the Greeks believed that music could actually bring the mind, body, and soul into harmony. As for more modern history, music therapy as a formal profession really started to take shape in the 20th century, especially
So,
after.
like, what year? What year approximately? Who was the first person? What happened? How was it presented to the public?
Yeah, so if we're talking about a more concrete timeline, we can look at the early 1900s. One big milestone is after World War One and World War Two, when musicians would actually go into veterans hospitals to play for soldiers who were recovering. That kind of kicked off the idea of music therapy
And
in a more.
what kind of music were they playing? Like, what was going on there?
Yeah, so a lot of it was actually pretty interesting because it was music that was familiar and comforting to the soldiers. So they might have been playing popular songs from that era, maybe big band tunes or jazz standards that the soldiers knew and loved. And really, the idea was just to give them something that felt familiar, lifted their spirits, and helped them recover.
So that was
So,
kind of the science behind it. Let's just make these soldiers feel better. What there wasn't anything cognitive or scientifically proven to facilitate the option as music as therapy.
yeah, exactly. In the early days, it was really more about that intuitive sense of, hey, music makes people feel better. So let's do that. It wasn't initially grounded in scientific studies. It was more like, let's do what works. And they saw that
Okay, so who was the first doctor or person to offer some kind of science behind the therapy?
yeah. So one name that often comes up is a guy named E. Thayer Gaston. He's sometimes called the father of music therapy in the US. In the mid 20th century, he really started to lay down some of the academic and scientific groundwork. So he helped develop university programs and actual research around how music could be used therapeutically.
And what
So
was his education?
yeah, so Ether Gaston actually had a background in psychology and music. He earned a doctorate in psychology, and he was really one of the first people to blend those two worlds in an academic setting.
And
He,
how did the first presentation to his peers and what was the science behind that?
yeah, so when Gaston started presenting his ideas to his peers, he really focused on showing that music had measurable effects on things like mood, on anxiety levels, even on physical responses like heart rate. So he kind of brought in that psychological and physiological measurement to say, look, this isn't just about making people feel better in a general sense. We can actually measure what's going on.
But
And
was there science behind the music being presented to the patient, or was it just science based from the patient's condition?
yeah, so in those early days, it was more about measuring the patient's response rather than having a super detailed scientific breakdown of exactly which music worked best. They didn't have like a formula that said, play this exact song and you'll get this result. It was more like, let's see how music in general affects anxiety or mood. And over time, they started refining which types of music worked best for different people.
And
But it was.
what were some of those types of music that worked best for, let's say, depression?
Yeah, so over time, they did find that certain types of music tended to be really helpful for things like depression. Often it was music that was calming and melodic, sometimes classical pieces,
Do you have
sometimes.
any examples of the artists that were used in the early stages of music therapy?
Yeah, absolutely. So in those early stages, they often leaned on classical composers like Mozart or Bach because their music was pretty widely accepted as calming and structured. But as time went on, they also started using more contemporary music that the patients themselves liked, whether that was jazz standards or even early rock and roll. It really depended on what the patient found comforting. So it was a
So
mix of.
how did the evolution of the science of music as therapy develop since its beginning to modern day?
Yeah, so the evolution's been pretty fascinating. Basically, from those early days of just seeing what worked, it moved into more structured research. Over the decades, they started doing clinical trials, measuring how different types of music affected different conditions, and now it's a recognized field with
And what is
board.
some of that data? What kinds of music today in today's day and age affect what kind of disorders?
Yeah, definitely. So these days, there's actually quite a bit of data. For example, for anxiety and stress, they often use calming instrumental music, things like slow tempo classical or even ambient music. For depression, uplifting or familiar music that the person enjoys can help improve mood. And for things like dementia, they often use music from a person's youth because it can spark memories and really help them connect. So there's a lot of tailored approaches now based on the data they've gathered over the years.
So, what are some of the artists for from the 70s or 80s that were commonly being used in music therapy?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about the 70s or 80s, a lot of the music that got used in music therapy was just whatever was familiar and comforting to people at that time.
So a lot of it is patient chosen. So like let's say we got this heavy metalhead who loves Cannibal Corpse, and Cannibal Corpse, which is like vicious, gruesome death metal, calms him. Would that be something that a psychologist would use as music therapy if it applied to that patient?
Yeah, absolutely. It really is very patient centered. So if someone feels calm listening to Cannibal Corpse, even if it's not the traditional idea of calming music, a music therapist would absolutely say, let's use that. It's all
Okay,
about.
so let's say I'm depressed. I have depression problems, or I don't even know what's wrong. I just feel like I need some help, and I go in to see a music therapist. How do I first get referred to a music therapist? Like, how does that work in my appointment with a psychologist or psychiatrist?
Yeah, definitely. So usually what happens is if you're seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist and they think, hey, music therapy might be a good fit for you, they can refer you to a certified music therapist. And then when you have that first appointment, the music therapist is going to talk to you about what kind of music you like, what you're comfortable with, and really tailor it to you. So it kind of starts with that referral and then becomes a really personalized approach based on what you need and what you like.
So, as a musical therapist, do you have to have a degree in psychology and music, or how does that work?
Yeah, so generally music therapists do have specialized training. They usually have a degree in music therapy specifically, which includes coursework in both music and psychology, as well as clinical training. So they kind of get the best of both worlds. They learn how to use music in a therapeutic context, and they also have that psychological understanding. And then they have to get certified and licensed depending on where they are. So yeah,
Okay,
it's
so
a
I've seen a psychiatrist. I've been referred to a music therapist. How does the first interaction with me as a patient go with my new music therapist? What happens in that first appointment?
Yeah, absolutely. So that first appointment is usually pretty conversational. The music therapist is going to chat with you, get to know what kind of music you like, and really just try to understand what you're comfortable with. They might ask you about your favorite songs or what kind of music you find relaxing or uplifting. And from there, they'll start to come up with a plan that's really personalized to you. So that first session is really about building that relationship and figuring out what works best for you.
So how does the prescription go? Like what are the tasks in therapy with music therapy that you're supposed to complete towards becoming better?
Yeah, definitely. So in music therapy, the kind of prescription is really more like a set of personalized activities. For example, you might be asked to listen to certain music at home as kind of a form of homework or self care. You might do some active music making in the sessions, like singing or playing an instrument, if that's something you're comfortable with. And the therapist might also guide you through relaxation exercises with music.
Is there
So it
anybody currently who is a philosopher who has philosophy about the future of music as therapy?
Yeah, absolutely. There are definitely some modern thinkers and philosophers in the field of music therapy who are looking at where it's headed. One example is Dr. Jane Edwards, who's pretty well known in the field. And she talks a lot about how technology and things like telehealth are going to shape the future of music therapy.
What's telehealth?
Yeah, absolutely. So telehealth is basically just using technology to deliver healthcare remotely. So instead of having to go in person to see a therapist, you could do a music therapy session over a video call. And that's
Okay,
kind of
so what are some of the methods of self care? How can someone look after maybe a condition that's not that serious or just feeling down in the dumps? What is a good self prescription for music therapy to apply to yourself by yourself?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're just feeling a bit down and you want to use music for a bit of self-care, a really simple way is just to create a playlist of songs that you know lift your mood or help you relax. You can just take some time, put on those songs, and let yourself unwind. Another really simple thing is just to hum or sing along to music that you like, because that can actually help boost your mood. So it's really about finding those little moments in the day to use music that you love as a way to take care of yourself.
So, what is the chemistry that happens inside your brain that improves things like mania and depression that occurs? What chemically occurs from music that is appreciated towards your mental illness?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's happening in your brain is that when you listen to music you enjoy, it can actually trigger the release of feel-good chemicals like dopamine. And dopamine is basically a neurotransmitter that makes you feel pleasure and reward. So when you're feeling down, or even if you're feeling kind of manic, listening to music that you enjoy can help balance out some of those brain chemicals and just lift your mood overall. So it's really all about that natural chemical reaction in the brain that music can help trigger.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Good talk.
You're very welcome. Always a pleasure to chat, Brendan.